Hello dear learners, I am Dr. Shamili Mandal and I am back with the 5th lecture of my 10th module. In my 5th lecture, I will be dealing with the instances from South India, and the name of the module you already know, that is Folk and Modern Society, the Challenges and Acceptances. Here I will be talking about the South Indian states, or you can say the South Indian cluster we have of the states of Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Tamil Nadu. So, modern South Indian society has a complex and developing connection with folk culture, characterized by veneration, commodification and marginalization. Many traditional art forms are being revived thanks to the efforts of cultural institutions like as the Sangeet Natak Academy, state art academies and universities. Tamil Nadu's Tamiz Isai Sangam and Kerala's Folklore Academy, for example, promote folklore documentation and training. Folk arts are being included in performing arts curricula at universities, establishing them as legitimate academic topics of investigation. Veteran folk performers are honored by governments at the state and national levels. Recognition has also elevated some performers to celebrity status, such as Padma Shri recipients from the traditional arts community. Folk music and dance have had a significant role in South Indian movies, but with stylized versions. For example, Tamil films include Gana and Kuttu music, the urban folk form, into high energy songs. Telugu films use Janapada or the folk songs with current sounds. These portrayals are a double-edged sword, popularizing the genre while frequently removing it from its original social setting. A significant component of state-sponsored tourism is the folk culture. Keralan Theyyam performances at tourist events or in resorts, and in Karnataka the Karaga and the Yakshagana displayed at cultural expos are a part of the tourism. This raises awareness, but it can also commercialize ritualistic or sacred behaviors, raising questions about their genuineness. Rural life is heavily ingrained with folk customs. We have the Telangana or the Andhra Pradesh Burrakatha and Ogukatha. In the Tamil town of Therukuttu and in Kerala's Muslim communities, Oppana and Duffmuttu continue to play a significant role in festivals, customs and oral storytelling. They continue to have social, religious and communal significance, particularly during festivals that are connected to agriculture on the seasons. In urban areas, middle class and elite people occasionally view peasant culture as backward or less developed. Young urbanites, on the other hand, are taking these elements and are experimenting with them. They are becoming the folk rhythm samples in indie music, movements for documenting and theatre collectives. We have also the Dalit element and the Adivasi culture, which elements are being taken by the young generation and they are incorporating them in their music and making their music, a combination of, essentially South Indian and other aspects, you can say other features of folk music. It's beautiful actually, and the rhythms and the beats are very much striking a chord in the hearts of the people. Once stigmatized, Parayattam is now recovering its place in Tamil Nadu as a symbol of pride and resistance. Despite the popularity of the art, caste-based prejudice persists and performers frequently do not achieve the same social standing. South Indian youngsters are increasingly influenced by pop culture from the north and west, and as I said that the oral and performative traditions are marginalized and in some ways the folk culture is also eroding. though it is being modified and evolved, but during the same time, though it is being incorporated in music, interpreted and reinterpreted, somewhere or the other, the original essence is, getting gradually lost. Now, I'll be talking about the examples from Tamil Nadu or the instances from Tamil Nadu. Depending on how well they suited the objectives of modernity, social reform and progress, elements of Tamil Nadu's traditional culture were either discarded, altered or retained during the process of creating a modern society. As markers of Tamil cultural identity, Karagattam, Teraguttu, Billupattu and Oyilattam have been conserved. To preserve these creative forms, they have been modified for theatrical productions, cultural events and even classrooms. In many places, traditional medicine such as Siddha has been integrated with modern healthcare and has received institutional support. For sustainable development, indigenous farming methods such as water management techniques known as airy tank or irrigation have been re-examined and occasionally reinstated. Local deities such as Mariamman, Ayannar and Karuppaswamy are still worshipped, albeit frequently in a more formal religious context. The broader cultural narrative of Tamil identity now includes village festivals honoring these deities. The rituals associated with the worship, like animal sacrifice and somewhere even the human sacrifice, have been disregarded and have been discarded in the present times due to humanitarian grounds. We all know about PETA, right, which actually advocates against, animal killing, and they are the foremost one to ban the animal killing and the sacrifices which took place in the name of worship. Legal and social challenges have been made against beliefs of these sacrifices and also of that supports caste-based discrimination, such as the exclusion of Dalits from temple rites. Modern legal and social reform initiatives have led to a growing rejection of folk customs that limited women's participation in public life or reinforced patriarchal norms. Education and legal systems have prohibited traditional practices such as child marriage and excessive types of puberty ceremonies. Folk stories, music and motifs have been transformed for a broader audience via popular media and film. Tamil films frequently use folklore to appeal to both urban and rural viewers. Once marginalized, traditions now receive official recognition because to the inclusion of folk history and artifacts in educational curriculum and museums. Tamil Nadu's folk culture was filtered by modernization rather than completely eradicated. While elements that went against democratic, rational or egalitarian norms were either rejected or changed, those that promoted identity, inclusivity and sustainability were welcomed. The constant balancing act between tradition and advancement is reflected in this selective integration. Now, I'll be talking about the instances from Kerala. The shift from traditional to contemporary civilization in Kerala, like in many other parts of the world, was marked by a complex interplay of continuity and change. Certain components of folk culture were preserved or altered in the process of creating a modern civilization. We have the very important role of performing arts as a symbol or marker of cultural identity. And we have the Theyyam, the very famous one, and the Kaliyattam, which were conserved as emblematic depictions of Kerala's distinct cultural heritage. These days, state-sponsored cultural events and tourism campaigns like the Kerala Tourism Department's brand frequently include these forms. Folk tales and oral traditions from the Aithyamala, a collections of myths and stories from Kerala, have been translated, published and even incorporated into contemporary theatre and literature. This preservation demonstrates how old narratives are valued in contemporary academic and literary communities. Despite its ancient roots, we also have the practice of Ayurveda or the traditional medicine, which has found a place in Kerala's contemporary healthcare and wellness industry. It has gained international reputation as a result of being institutionalized through government sponsored Ayurvedic hospitals and incorporated with contemporary procedures. In Kerala, if you ever go to Kerala, you will see a lot of wellness centers are there, right, which actually rejuvenates the minds from a hectic schedule. They have, they are based normally in the outskirts of the city, and they are actually spreading, wide acres of land, and they provide, wellness retreat programs for around, you can say, 1 month or 15 days, and they have a proper diet, they have a proper yoga session, a therapy session, and they indulge in hobbies and outdoor activities and keeps you energized and also gives you motivation and boosts you for your life. It actually acts as, you can say, a catalyst, you can say, removing the toxicity of our lives and also giving us new energy for new beginnings. That is how, Ayurveda along with its healing practices have been incorporated in the wellness centers in Kerala. Though they are frequently either commercialized or strictly regulated for safety and tourism, many local temple festivals such as Purams nonetheless preserve folk practices and community involvement. Reform arts like those headed by Sri Narayana Guru and the Temple Entry Proclamation of 1936 have led to a critical examination or the phase out of folk rites that reinforce caste hierarchy, such as purification rituals and some oracle practices. Once essential to certain folk traditions, practices like animal sacrifices and black magic, mantravaram, have been generally disapproved or outlawed as a result of contemporary legal, ethical and scientific viewpoint. Some folk traditions that prohibited women from taking part in ritual performances or celebrations have been contested. One example of a contemporary, more inclusive interpretation of folk culture is the rise in popularity of women performing Theyyam, a previously male-dominated art form. With the move to commercial farming and mechanization, seasonal songs and rituals that were connected to traditional agricultural cycles have diminished. For instance, folklore archives today have more pattukal songs than fieldwork. Kerala's native culture was selectively adapted, and practice that ran against to social equality, scientific logic or ethical standards were marginalized, while aspects that fit with a contemporary, inclusive and secular spirit were welcomed. Now, I am going to talk about the instances from Karnataka. Like in many other parts of the world, Karnataka's traditional culture has been both preserved and marginalized in the process of creating a modern society. We have the very famous Yakshagana, which I have mentioned earlier quite a few times, and this historic theatre style was maintained and encouraged, fusing dance, music, conversations and ornate customs. It is being performed in cities and on national stages in addition to rural coastal Karnataka. We have the exuberant drum dance, Dolukunitha, and which represents the cultural liveliness of Karnataka and has been adopted by schools, cultural festivals and national gatherings. To preserve regional heritage, numerous folk tales, riddles and poems have been recorded and has formed a part of the Janapada Sahitya, that is the folk literature. Under GI labeling and sustainable artisan industries, crafts like Kasuti needlework and Chanapatna toys, lacquered wooden toys have found a place in the worldwide market. To modernize designs without sacrificing their traditional value, the government and non-governmental organizations have offered trainings and platforms. Despite their indigenous origins, festivals like Karaga, the Banni festival at Bamni Pantapa, the Mysuru Dasara, and the Kambala, the buffalo racing, are marketed as cultural tourism destinations. Modern laws and rationalist movements opposed or outlawed animal sacrifices and spirit worship, Bhutakhala. Additionally, caste discriminatory practices that were ingrained in certain rites were purposefully eradicated or minimized in public view. Traditionally, certain castes were there who were allowed to attend certain folk performances. But as caste eradication is very much in progress, you can say very much rapid in the societies, nowadays everyone is seeing the folk performances, people from all areas are seeing and all castes are seeing the folk performances, taking part in the folk performances, innovating the designs of the costumes and playing major roles in these performances alongside women. Previously, the Dalit women and the Dalit men actually were not allowed into temples and these elaborate performances. As I mentioned, it was the same scenario in the whole of South India actually, but now things are changing and everybody is equally a part of the culture. The oral traditions and the way of life of numerous indigenous tribes and nomadic communities have long been disregarded in mainstream governance and education. Their marginalization throughout the creation of modern Karnataka was considerable, even though there is some resurgence today. Parts of folk culture that promoted a unified cultural identity and could be modified to fit democratic, secular and commercially feasible frameworks were carefully adapted as part of Karnataka's modernization. At the same time, things deemed to be illogical, biased or unscientific and resulted in the deterioration of complex customs. It's still difficult to strike a balance between preservation and advancement. Next, I am going to talk about the instances from Andhra Pradesh. Depending on social, political and economic factors, elements of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana's folk culture were either included, modified or eliminated through the transition from a traditional to a contemporary society. The storytelling traditions, the Harikatha, the Burrakatha and the Ogukatha were accepted as means of fostering cultural pride and public education. Burrakatha was modified to increase political awareness during the Telangana movement. Local identity and tourism were promoted by the preservation and display of Lambari and Bonalu dances during cultural events. Particularly after independence, folk idioms, proverbs and songs were included into popular media, such as the Telugu literature and film to provide relatable stories for audiences in rural and semi-urban areas. Following the creation of the Telangana state in 2014, the Telangana dialect was given new respect and granted official recognition in broadcasting and education. So, now I want to give you the example of the South Indian film industry. We have all watched more or less the movies of the South India, right? And previously, the commercial movies actually had a very simple plot line. They were based mostly in villages and the important element was the village life along with the folk element. And now we have the movies like the Bahubali we have, and we have several high grossing movies of South India, right, which have given us a different aspect and a different perspective of what the folk culture of South India is about. The commercialized movies have been filtered, have been modified, and the myths and the legends, though some of them are fictional and some of them are based on true events, they have inspired us. They have made the audience enthralled to the cinema houses and also have given us a fresh perspective, or you can say a fresh outlook of how we viewed South Indian cinema. Previously, most of the commercialized cinema, as I mentioned, showed a very similar plot line, a very similar story actually. But nowadays, they are incorporating more folk elements, they are reinterpreting them, and they are giving, a better, you can say, view to us and making us more knowledgeable about the folk culture of South India. Government initiatives and international shows promoted handicrafts including bidri ware, nirmal paintings and cherial scrolls. These industries have been preserved as heritage sectors and are currently aided by programs such as geographical indication tags. In the spirit of social equality, some folk rituals connected to caste hierarchies, such as those that upheld untouchability or caste dominance, were formally discouraged or outlawed. For example, hereditary priesthood or caste-based temple access limitations in rural deities' temples have come under growing scrutiny and change. Modern healthcare institutions mainly replaced the dangerous exorcism rituals, witchcraft and black magic beliefs that were common in folk healing methods. Public health programs and government awareness campaigns attempted to substitute scientific approaches for hazardous traditional medical practices. Folk traditions that repressed women's responsibilities were also contested, such as prohibitions or taking part in particular celebrations or artistic endeavors. Women's involvement in Bonalu, Batukamma and other public events has grown dramatically as a result of modern education and reforms, changing the roles that were previously determined by folk traditions. Folk culture has not been completely abandoned by modern civilization in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Rather, it eliminated the practices which were not secular, which were not democratic, and which were against the scientific goals, retaining expressiveness and identity forming aspects. As a result, tradition and modernity continue to mix in a complicated but vibrant cultural landscape. Now, I am going to talk to you about the cases or the instances from Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep Islands and Puducherry, previously Pondicherry. While some aspects of folk culture may be rejected or changed, as we have seen, in the name of advancement, integration or national development, others are frequently kept for their heritage value and sense of communal identity when constructing a modern society. The tourism and the cultural events are used to promote the Nicobarese traditional items such as carvings, mats and baskets. Indigenous methods such as sustainable fishing and herbal medicine have been carefully examined and incorporated into models of local development. The traditional justice system have been replaced by modern legal institutions, which has resulted in a loss of self-governance in some tribal areas. For instance, the Andaman Trunk Road has threatened the Jarwa tribe's traditional way of life despite legal protections. As we know that the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands, they have formed, various tribes. They have numerous tribes and we know about very less tribes of Andaman and Nicobar. We mostly know of the Jarwa and the Sentinelese because they are the two prominent tribes which are there in Andaman and Nicobar. But the Jarwas, we say, they are very much secluded and they keep an isolated lifestyle. They do not come much into, you can say, the public sphere or interact with the public sphere. Previously it was said that the people who invaded the Jarwa forest were actually killed. But nowadays you can say the Jarwas even are finding that the modern technology is necessary for them too, and they are now more or less hostile to the outsiders. But still, due to the growing tourism in Andaman and Nicobar, their life is being compromised and they are being more vulnerable to the outside society. Also, the Jarwa is threatened by modern pressures, as I said, because they are more in public, and the roads which are being built in the Jarwa areas are also probing a problem for them. Now, the festivals, the architecture and the attires of these places reflect the island's strong Islamic character. The local fishing festivals, boat building and sea songs are often marked as tourist attractions. Strict traditional norms, and in light of contemporary education and rights awareness, several restrictive customs, particularly those that restrict women's involvement in public life, are being questioned. The Malayalam and English are becoming more common, especially in schools, whereas Jesseri, a regional dialect, is becoming less common. For instance, in 2021, protest erupted against government's attempts to modernize Lakshadweep because proposed reforms were perceived as a danger to regional culinary and customary habits. The architecture and the cuisine, the Tamil-French multilingual thing, all preserve the legacy of the French colonization. This is now essential to both local identity and tourist. Alongside colonial legacies, local temple festivals and folk dances such as Kuttu are still popular. Strict caste customs have been weakened by urbanization and modern education. Administrative and social hierarchies associated with colonial control were removed following independence, notwithstanding the celebration of French culture. For instance, the French Quarter in Puducherry is preserved as a historical place, yet it is entirely governed by Indian and the democratic principles. In all these three regions, folk culture has been carefully adapted. Features that match with identity, tourism and environmental sustainability are preserved, while those perceived as impediments to equality, development or integration are downplayed or modified. Now, I come to give you a conclusion actually of the culture or the folk culture in South India. The way that contemporary South Indian society responds to traditional culture exhibits a complicated dichotomy, striking a balance between commodification and celebration, pride and prejudice, and preservation and neglect. Folk artists continue to fight for ongoing respect and dignity despite increased institutional backing and acceptance, particularly in a culture whose cultural hierarchies are shaped by caste, class and modernity. A deeper conflict between the ideas of cultural pride and the realities of social exclusion is revealed by the duality in South Indian society's relationship with folk culture. Modernization provides resources for resuscitation, but it also runs the risk of erasing diversity and neglecting the hardships of individuals who have traditionally preserved these customs. The South Indian folk culture is in a precarious equilibrium, revered in theory but marginalized in reality. Its survival hinges not just on commemoration, but also on the development of inclusive institutions that respect the rights, voices and dignity of the artist who created. Now, we come to the end of our 5th lecture of the 10th module. And here I have tried in throughout my all the lectures to give you a comprehensive idea about the inclusion of certain elements of folk culture and the eradication of certain elements of folk culture based on how they are applicable to the modern society. Thank you and see you in my next lecture.